Welcome to Featherfin Films' first collaboration video. This video was created with the aid of JERACERX, sports car knowledge extraordinaire, and BoostAndEthanol. Automotive fanatic, fellow small YouTuber, subscribe to BoostAndEthanol, and an incoming engineer. This and other future collaborations with these two will be branded as Pit Stop Productions to distinguish them from more in-house projects. Unlike most group projects, we all poured our weight in its creation. JERACER wrote most of the script and came up with the idea, Boost recorded and edited the script, and I put everything together, and also edited the script a bit. Anyway, let's let Boost introduce us to the wacky world of the Grand American Road Racing Association, also known as GARA. Couldn't let that one slip past. Take it away, Boost!
It's 2023, and sports car racing is having its biggest resurgence in manufacturer interest at the top level in decades. The word of the moment is convergence, with the ACO's Lamar Hypercar and IMSA's LMDH rule sets being accepted by both sanctioning bodies, for the most part, allowing both the World Endurance Championship and IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship to be competed in with the same car, uniting the world of sports car racing in a way that hasn't been seen for over 50 years. But this is old news if you follow sports car racing. Honestly, it's amazing we even got to this point. 2 decades ago, sports car racing's constant boom and bust cycle was arguably at its lowest point in history. Le Mans wasn't a championship race, and series around the world did their best to stave off the magical word convergence even regionally, let alone globally. In the US, this was the civil war that raged for over a decade between IMSA's American Le Mans series and NASCAR's Grand American Road Racing Championship. Yes, US racing had to deal with more than one major split in the 90s. United States, divided racing. While the ALMS had the backing of the ACO and more or less followed the same rules as Le Mans, let's just say Grand Am decided to take their own path. The Grand Am story starts in 1998, when the Sports Car Club of America launched the United States Road Racing Championship to combat IMSA's then named Professional Sports Car Racing Series. The USRRC started off strongly by swiping the Daytona 24 hours and Watkins Glen 6 hours from IMSA, but this strategy could only do so much to fight the fundamental issue. In 1998, North American sports car racing was in a rough patch. Grid sizes were dwindling outside of the major crown jewel events, which typically consisted of local drivers joining the few full-time entries. All the SCCA did was compound this issue, as their series had a copy-paste class structure to that of IMSA's. Competitors consisted of a prototype class, Can-Am for SCCA, World Sports Car for IMSA, and 3 GT classes. The two series spent 98 having similar grid sizes, often with the exact same teams and cars competing. However, for 1999 change was on the horizon. Don Panos had taken control of IMSA and established the American Le Mans Series, a championship with the bonus of being supported by the ACO, meaning the rule sets between Le Mans and the ALMS would allow teams and cars to hop the pond and compete in both. While the ALMS was thriving in its first season, the USRRC was struggling. After Daytona, competitor interest had fallen back to the standard 1998 levels, and ultimately the series would fold after 2 more races. This would not be the end of the story. NASCAR had been keen to move into the sports car market, so snapped up the remains of the USRRC and rebranded it as the Grand American Road Racing Championship, better known as Grand Am. We just established that a split had failed before, so what was NASCAR's plan to compete with the thriving LMS? Well, while the rival series was doing extremely well in its first year, some concerns were growing in smaller budget teams, as IMSA aimed at getting manufacturer interest in more well-equipped teams. Grand Am looked squarely in the one place where they could attract these less fortunate teams over the ALMS, the cars themselves. While the ACO's class structure allowed for a common rule set between ALMS and Le Mans, it also meant that the prototype rules were aimed at manufacturers to dump countless resources into, while the GT class was subject to homologation rules for what cars were allowed to run. It was organised and professional. Grand Am came up with a class structure that would avoid any notion of being considered too professional. For its debut year, the new championship was made up of 5 different classes, the 2 prototype classes SR and SR2, and 3 GT classes, GTO, GTU and AGT. The prototype classes are the least goofy and quickest to explain, so let's run by them first. Grand Am decided in its first year to also have a shared rule set with a European sanctioning body, the Sports Racing World Cup, Europe's premier prototype racing series. The top SR class didn't differ too greatly from the ACO's LMP 900 class in concept, but there were 2 major differences between the 2 classes. both specifically to keep costs lower in SR. The first was the banning of expensive carbon ceramic brakes that were beginning to see use in factory developed prototypes. The second was aimed squarely at the new breed of cars, by requiring that a car's roll bar cover the entire length of the cockpit, after the BMW V12 LMR and Panel's LMP Roadster exploited a hoop in the ACO's rules by having only a single hoop roll bar over the driver. The design was copied by many prototypes following them, such as the all-conquering Audi R8. These rules led to a grid of prototypes in SR being nearly unchanged from the IMSA WSC years that were in place for most of the 90s, with the Riley & Scott Mark III and Ferrari 333 SP continuing their battle, now without the threat of factory BMWs and Panoses, to say less of the Audi steamroller laying waste to the ALMS. The Ferrari would begin to show its age as support from Ferrari dwindled with the new engine restrictor rules that heavily affected the high-revving V12. The Doran team swapped their V12 for an F1-derived 4-litre Judd GV4 V10. Said Judd V10 would also appear in some of the Riley & Scotts competing at the grid's pointy end. Speaking of which, the Riley & Scott Mark III was still the most common car in the category thanks to its speed and ease of operation. Newcomers to the formula appeared in the form of the year-old Lola B9810 and its evolution for 2000, the B2K10. Reynard dropped their hat into the ring with the 2KQ, a fairly rushed effort that debuted at the Daytona 24 and never showed up in the Grand Am series again, as the car was developed throughout the year running in ALMS and at Le Mans. After testing a Reynard, Dyson went back to their Riley & Scott, a car capable of winning races. Even considering that the rules were aimed to keep expensive factory efforts out, Cadillac debuted their Northstar LMP at Daytona, although this was more indicative of how conservative the car was designed to even fit Grand Am regulations in the first place. Other oddities included Hans device creator Jim Downing's 4-rotor Kudzu DLY in its second year of competition, the new and fairly budget Norma M2000 of the Setzio Florida race team, the Group C and IMSA GTP derived Spice conversions that made their last ever starts to the Daytona 24, another Kudzu, this one being the originally 4-rotor powered DLM4 from 1997, now with a small block Chevy installed, and finally the Banshee, a car that has its own retrolicious website that still somehow exists, complete with its own cocktail recipe. The website is linked in the description. While the SR cars battled out for top honours at Daytona, the SR2 class would make their debut at the second round at Phoenix. With similar rules to the top SR class construction wise, the main difference was that the SR2 cars were lighter and their engines more limited. They could have a maximum of 3 litres, 6 cylinders, and they had to be road derived. While SR cars battled out for top honours at Daytona, the SR2 class would make their debut at the second round at Phoenix. With similar rules to the top SR class construction wise, the main difference was that the SR2 cars were lighter and their engines more limited. They could have a maximum of 3 litres, 6 cylinders, and they had to be road derived. Maybe it's no surprise that this class would be the least subscribed of the season. Archangel Motorsport would be the first to strike blood in an ex-IMSA WSC Magnum SC205 with a 4.5 litre Chevy engine. Perhaps they pulled some strings to run that oversized engine, as the car never appeared again after just a single appearance. After that, they swapped out to an AER Nissan VQ powered Lola B2K40. These Lolas would be the weapon of choice in the majority of battles, between the aforementioned Archangel Motorsports, Snowshoe Mecca Racing, and TRP Racing. Taking along with the Lola teams was the ex-IMSA WSC Kudzu DLM, with its 3-rotor engine. The Sports Racing World Cup also held 2 joint rounds with Grand Am this year, the Paul Revere 250 night race at Daytona, and the Road America 500 miles. I failed to mention this earlier because these joint rounds only actually had 4 takers from Europe, 2 Nissan powered Pilbeam MP84s of Redmond Bright, and 2 factory Alpha V6 Tempoli SR2 RTA 99s, none of which really put up a fight against the Lolas, which had swept all but the final race at Watkins Glen, where the Kudzu took the win. Now the relatively normal stuff is either qualified on the front row or left for Le Mans, it's time to get into the goofiness that was the GT classes. Remember how the ACO's GT homologation kept the grids relatively sanitised in the ALMS? Well, Grand Am did nothing of the sort, as the GT rules were determined by 2 basic things: how big the engine was, and if it was turbocharged. Other than that, the rules were pretty open, besides a minimum weight and a 5-year limit on how old a car could be. Let's kick this off with the GTU class, the U being for naturally aspirated engines under 4 litres. There were 3 main representatives. The brand new Porsche 996 GT3R, a car designed for the ACO GT and the FIA GT's NGT classes. Finally offered to customer teams after a soft launch in 1999 at Le Mans and in the LMS, this car was a turning point in GT racing, being the first real factory-built and supported GT car offered to the teams in huge numbers. For proof, look no further than the fact there were 23 at the Daytona 24 alone, or in other words, over a quarter of the cars that started. But Porsche's main rival throughout the season would be the prototype technology group E36 BMW M3, which were outdated by ALMS standards, but were perfect for customer teams to run in Grand Am. The final, the main trio, would be the Porsche 911 Carrera RSR, the predecessor to the 996 GT3R, which came mostly in 993 form, although many of these were actually older 911s such as 930s and 964s rebodied, and a few were even tube framed, like the Pumpelly car which started life as a 1976 911 Turbo. Since 1992, that Pumpelly car was an IMSA GTU car and had just been banned after the first year of ALMS. Similarly, the Mazda RX-7 was represented throughout the season by both tube-framed FD-bodied cars powered by 13Bs and the Petite Racing RX-7 Turbo? So yeah, every time the class rules are mentioned, they clearly state only naturally aspirated cars are eligible for GTU, yet lo and behold there's an RX-7 listed as a turbo right here. Now, the specific technical regulations haven't been archived, but here's what might have happened. A few years earlier, both IMSA and the US RRC had a rule that allowed cars from SCCA's World Challenge T1 and later GT classes to run as GT3 cars, regardless of any rules they didn't fit, which led to cars like the Saleen Mustang and Mitsubishi Eclipse GSX being able to compete. Perhaps this rule still existed in the first year of Grand Am, and as the Petite RX-7 was indeed built for World Challenge, it was allowed to run. But I digress. Another car with some series crossover was the Ferrari 355, 2 of which showed up to the Daytona 24. One of these cars was run by Yellow Magic from Japan, and had previously been used in the GT300 class in JGTC. The last model to show up in GTU in the inaugural season was the Porsche 996 Cup, which although wasn't competitive, proved to be a reliable low-cost car for the occasional one-off entry. GTO is where stuff really goes off the rails. The class was headlined at Daytona by the factory Viper GTSR and Corvette C5R battle, with the contemporary 993 GT2s from the ex-factory Rook team and others from the FIA GT. But looking further down the grid, we enter the Twilight Zone, a strange approximation of what can be considered a professional GT series. GTO being a class for cars with engines over 4 litres sounds simple enough, but there was a reason most series had moved away from this formula and aimed to balance different styles of cars together. The main casualty dividing cars by engine size and not much else was the Spectre Works Corvette GTR. This car had been conceived as an ALMS GT class car, but had been rejected for homologation reasons at Petit Le Mans in 1999. The car showed up to Daytona competing against the Viper GTSRs and Corvette C5Rs, when realistically it should have been up against Porsche 996 GT3Rs. The other half of the rule stated that all turbocharged GTs were classed as GTOs. This was fine for the 993 GT2, but the rest of the Porsche contingent was absolutely destroyed by this. Outside of the typical 911, Porsche was also represented by a tube-frame 968 at Daytona with a 2.6 litre turbocharged engine. That put it in the GTO class along with the 944 turbo duo of Broadfoot Racing. Wait, 944? But the rules said the car couldn't be more than 5 years old. So how could a 944 possibly be running in 2000? Simple, Grand Am just let them pretend they were 968s. Neither of these cars would qualify for Daytona, but one car from the tube frame contingent would, the Chrysler Motorsport Corvette, which matched contemporary Trans Am specs at the time. After the Vipers took the overall win at Daytona, the factory and FIA contingent left. In their place, the factory Saleen Mustang SR showed up to complete the rest of the season. This car was an evolution of the car Saleen had debuted for World Challenge back in 1995, raced at Le Mans in 1997, and in ALMS in 1999. Its purpose was mainly to be a test bed for the upcoming S7R. The 944s tagged along for most of the season, while the main rivalry would form between the Saleen and the privately built Viper GTS of Team Viper West, which started life as a club racing car and attempted an ALMS GT class start in 1999, also being rejected due to homologation like the Spectre Works Corvette. The McCann Actual Viper GTSR also showed up for a few rounds too, to mediocre results. At Mid-Ohio, the ancient C4 Trans Am Corvette of Motec Motorsports made a short appearance, also somehow ignoring the 5-year limit, and staying on track with Trans Am cars. Paul Gentilozzi and his Rocket Sport team showed up to Road Atlanta in their Trans Am Jaguar XKR. Coincidentally, the month after, Trans Am, a series that didn't allow testing on tracks ran on the calendar, would also run at Road America, but I'm sure that was completely coincidental. Road America also saw the Motorola Cup SGS Class Celine SR from TF Racing attempt to start, but DNF instantly. Motorola Cup's SGS Class ran similar specs to World Challenge GT cars, which brings into question if there was actually a loophole for them to run in GTU, but who knows. Similarly, the Troy Rivieras race saw the absolute specimen that was the 89 Racing Team's Mustang, which was also a World Challenge GT car. So yeah, again, absolutely no clue. The final race at Watkins Glen had a resurgence in numbers with a brigade of 911s joining the GTO grid. The two Rook 993 GT2s returned, along with the wild Free Spirit Motorsports GT2, which reportedly made around 650 horsepower out of its 3.6. To finish off on another mystery, we have the RS Motorsports Porsche 993 RSR. Why this car was in GTO? Who knows, although it's possible it was a turbocharged RSR, as it was later in club racing appearances, but there's no real way to confirm this. So, on to the final class, and it's a simple one. AGT, a class for tubed frame cars similar to contemporary Trans Am cars of the time. But didn't we just go over multiple contemporary Trans Am cars in GTO? Well, yes. But you see, AGT was designed for cars with bodies such as the Mustang and Camaro, while bodies like the Corvette and Jaguar were considered sports cars, because that makes perfect sense. Other bodies that were allowed into the class were the Oldsmobile duo of the Cutlass, that did not qualify at Daytona, and the Aurora. Although the class was primarily based around Trans Am style road racing chassis, some stock cars managed to sneak in as well. At the Daytona Paul Revere 250, a Monte Carlo and Jeff Gordon's Busch Series Thunderbird made an appearance for the night race, while at the Watkins Glen finale, Doran also entered an American Speed Association Pontiac Grand Prix. And then there's one car that is the single most confusing out of the entire series, the Dura-fitted Garage Camaro. So you know how the main thing about this class was that all the cars were tube framed? Well, this one isn't. It's a normal road-going Camaro modified for racing. In fact, the bodywork on the car seems to suggest that it originally was, wait for it, World Challenge T1 car. So there's potentially 4 cars, all from the same rule set, running in 3 different classes, and with that, I give up actually trying to figure out how any of this even worked.
Are you slightly lost? It's okay. When grids need to be filled in an unhealthy sport, you start to let in some interesting entries. It's good to make the front stretch look full on TV, but bad for people trying to build cars to a specific rule set. Anyway, Grand Am chose to chase cheapness as the primary goal of their series after 2000, culminating in 2003 with the introduction of the controversial Daytona prototype, which gave the series a unique identity for better or worse. The series would soldier on for 10 years after that, where it merged with the American Le Mans series to form the United Sports Car Championship. Tons of future ideas are packed in that 10-year span. My backlog is already long enough. New viewers, you know what to do if you want to hear more about cool bottom-dwelling fishes and semi-obscure endurance racing cars. There will be plenty more where that came from this year and beyond. Don't forget to subscribe to Boost and Ethanol. This is Synodontis Man signing off. Adios.